Alright, our next topic is the birth of democracy. So we have to compare the ancient democracy and modern democracy. So now we are going to examine the birth of modern democracy. So we have to go to ancient Athens. Ancient Athens is where democracy was invented, and demos, the social layer, actually the people, the average people who had no properties, who had no lands, they were not the aristocracy. They started to rule. This is democracy. Democracy means the rule of the people, the rule of demos. We are in ancient Greece, and this territory was never united, so it was not an empire. It was just a lot of polis. A polis is a city-state with a city center, and at the same time there is lands connected to the polis. Athens was one of them, and only few polis became democratic polis. Athens was the polis where democracy was the most complete. First, it was an aristocratic republic. After, of course, at the beginning, all the polis were kingdoms. But later, aristocratic republics appeared. This means that only the wealthiest people ruled the polis. But then it turned to democracy by a few hundred years of fights. The demos, the everyday people who just worked in the fields, they were traders or craftsmen, they started fighting for their political rights. And as reforms came, reforms of Solon and Cleisthenes, democracy was reached. So finally, aristocracy lost its power and demos got its power. So all the citizens could be the members of political life. So the most complete form was in the 5th century BC, the age of Pericles. This is what we call the golden age of Athens, because Athens was over the Persian wars, absolutely winner, and Athens attempted to reach hegemony. So in Greece, Athenians wanted to become absolute, the most powerful polis all around Greece. They created the Delian League on the island of Delos, and they started taxing other polis, so the most powerful polis it became. And what happened? In ancient Greece, in ancient Athens, in the 5th century, we are going to speak about the society and the political system, how their democracy looked like. Well, actually, in Athens there were three major groups in society. There were the Athenian citizens. Well, they were the only ones who had political rights, no others. And these people are males over 20. So their families, women, children, they didn't have any political rights, only the males. So it's only a small layer of the society. There were the metics who had no political rights. They were immigrants who found a living there, so they were traders and craftsmen, but they were not originally born in Athens. So they couldn't become citizens easily because they couldn't buy citizenship. So it didn't matter how wealthy they were actually out of politics. Athenian citizens, males over 20, they were guarding their rights. And of course, there were slaves without any political rights. Here is a chart showing us a diagram about the Athenian society, and look at this 14%. They were the full citizens, so with all the rights. Only 14% of the society. This is a very small number. So when we are talking about ancient Greek democracy, this is only the democratic system of very few people. What are the major differences between our society and ancient Greek society? So in Athens, only 14% of society have political rights. Well, today, everyone knows that over 18, you are a voter. You have political power. Homogeneous society it was. In ancient Athens, all the people who were part of democratic system, they were Athenians. And they had no individual rights, they just had their democratic rights. Today, this is a diverse society. Just think of the pluralist Hungarian society with a lot of nationalities and ethnic minorities. And today, the goal is to provide individual rights for everyone. In ancient Athens, there was compulsory state cult, so they had a religiously homogeneous society. They had their polytheistic religion, which everyone had to follow, and there was the state cult of Athens and Pallas Athena. But today, there is no ideology behind democracy. Today, you have a free choice of religions, so this is also a huge difference. At that time, in ancient times, it was direct democracy. This means political participation of the citizens is expected. It was compulsory to take part in the meetings of the ecclesia, the people's assembly, or bearing offices. It was compulsory for everyone who had political rights. I mean, this 14%. Today, we have a representative democracy, of course. Not everyone takes part in everyday political life. Citizens indirectly take part in that. Does that mean? Indirectly means that there are elections and the citizens elect their representatives. So they are represented in the democratic system, in the political life. So the system is controlled. Political positions in ancient Athens were by elections or by choosing people, chosen by lot. Well, of course, in modern times we cannot actually imagine if a person is chosen for a position. We only elect people and politicians to become officials and lead the society. Well, in Pericles' time, this was even more developed. All citizens, of course over 20 males, were members of the ecclesia, of the assembly, people's assembly. This was a very important body. They decided about positions, who should be the leader of military or any other purposes. Only the strategos, the military leader, was elected, and the rest is chosen by lot. So actually anyone could be in other positions. Pericles invented daily fee for people's court and the Council of 500 and later ecclesia participation. So if you were not wealthy and you couldn't leave your everyday job to go to take part in the political life, Pericles paid for it. So you could hire someone to do your job, and you could take part in the political life. So to ensure everybody can afford politics, he paid a daily fee. This is a special part of ancient democracy. It was introduced in Cleisthenes' time, so a little bit earlier than Pericles, but it was still in practice in Pericles' time. We call it the ballot of clay, cserépszavazás, or ostracism. Well, Cleisthenes lived in the beginning of 6th century BC, so a little bit before Pericles. And before that period, there had been a short period of tyranny, actually absolute power or dictatorship, as the Romans would say. And Athenian people didn't like dictatorship, didn't like tyranny, so they wanted to avoid tyranny. Cleisthenes introduced the ballot of clay. If someone got 6,000 votes written on clay tablets, little clay pieces, then this person was said to be a tyrant, and he was sent for a 10-year exile, but he could keep their properties Like, for example, Aristides, a famous military leader of Athens, he was sent for a 10-year exile, and later he could come back to Athens. But in this 10 years, he absolutely lost political power. This is a very important picture, and everyone has to be familiar with this. This is the Athenian political system. Let's start from below. In the middle, there are the citizens. As you see, only the citizens, not even their families, have political power. Everything above is political power. There are also the slaves without any political power, and of course the medics, the immigrants who settled down, they were just taxpayers. As you see, the citizens over 20 males were they had the right to be members in the ecclesia, the people's assembly. And at the same time, these people were those who could go to vote if there was ostracism. So if there was 6,000 votes for someone, then uh, they exile this person for 10 years. So let's go to ecclesia. This ecclesia, the people's assembly, decide about any other positions. As you see, archons, the Council of 500, and the Haleia, the so-called People's Court members, are all chosen by lot from these people. Only the strategos, there were 10 of these people, the military leaders, they were elected. So this is the Athenian political system. And as you see, only 14% of the society is responsible. Well, after the ancient part, we must remember that democracy was invented, and in the 18th century, the century of enlightenment, the democratic system also became thought about, and the greatest thinkers like Montesquieu, Rousseau, Diderot, Voltaire, they wanted to renew the ideas of democracy. So we are going into modern democracy. Well, modern democracy was born in the 18th century with enlightenment. Well, it's coming from France, and this ideology, the enlightenment, was born in France, and at the same, the meaning is the same, democracy meaning the rule of people, of course, and this is all about the sovereignty of people. Rousseau was the person who first wrote down that the sovereignty of people must come. This means that the people can decide their own will, what they want. And of course, the rights of the community, of the people, is more important than the individual thinking of a king or an emperor. Enlightened thinkers believed that the first generation of human rights should be provided to everyone. Yeah, in the 18th century, the first generation of human rights were created, or actually first written down. It was like independence, freedom, or property, speech. It's collected here. These must be provided to everyone, and that will be perfect. Montesquieu also said that the separation of power branches is very important to avoid tyranny, dictatorship, or absolutism. The power branches like the executive, the power, the legislative power, and jurisdiction, they must be separated. Montesquieu also thought about the state. The state is a kind of living together in peace. But how can we live in peace? Some of our rights should be passed to the states. For example, we cannot be violent, we cannot kill other people. We pass these rights to the state, but in return, the state protects the people. This is how a modern state should work. Of course, to get these first generation human rights, we have to fight the state. We need a constitution in the state which helps us keeping these rights and forces the state forces the state to provide these rights to the citizens. Well, in the 18th century, there were fights for it in different countries. In the French Revolution in 1789, they started this. And a little bit earlier in the USA, in the War of Independence against the English, they were fighting for the same things. So enlightenment was put into practice in these documents. In the French Revolution, they gave out the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, compiled or written by Lafayette, or in the USA, the Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson in 1776. These documents try to set and provide the rights to people. So, modern democracy is based on human rights provided to everyone, because everyone is equal. The equality of people, this democracy means.